Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our session. Let me just get started here. Let me open this up. Oops, that's the wrong one. All right, I'll just do it from here. All right, so our session is co-authoring and collaborating with Power BI.
If you're using the web version, you might want to go F11 to full screen.
Oh, okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
It didn't work. Yeah, so just to get started, my name is Liz Amador. I'm a data analyst at Western Governors University. We both work at the same place. We're based out of Salt Lake City. And I enjoy working with Matt. We've been on different teams, on the same team, co-located, working remotely. So I think this is going to be a great session. And I'll let Matt introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Labronte. I'm also a data analyst here at Western Governors University. I've had the privilege of working with Liz for about a year and a half now, and it's working on different teams, working in office, working remotely, and I think some of our experiences over the last year and a half working together, we've had some unique Power BI experiences, and I hope that we can kind of share with you guys some of the pro tips that we've learned and best practices. So I don't know where my mouse went. Gotta love it when your mouse stops working. All right. So the goal of what we want to do is, as I was saying, we want to walk away some best practices to improve co-authoring and working with other analysts, so that we can go through in the agenda. The goal is going to be to improve communication with workers and end users. We're going to have some business processes that we're going to talk about. Liz is going to show us a wonderful technical demo and of some best practices, and we're going to go through and talk about some people skills. And why should you care? Well, first is better product that we can offer to our customers. Better ideas that is going to give us some wider spectrum of people and specialization. And we want to create trust for our end users. And so in our case, it's going to be our executive managers that we want to present to and be able to help them make the decisions to run the organization. But, we want to create that trust, creating a nice branding. And the more people that are looking at our data, it's going to help us to have less data errors and less flaws in our designs. So we'll go ahead and talk about business processes, and I'm going to hand it over to Liz.
Great, thank you. Well, so a lot of this is trying to document things and where it should be documented, and how the business process should flow for the end users as well. So I wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about how you actually get requests. I don't know if this also happens to anyone else, but I get these kind of emails all the time. So somebody will say kind of like a random or unspecific request. So they'll say like, hey, can you get me the number of widgets or tickets by team in like a pie chart or something? And they have a presentation in the morning, and then they try to make it up with tacos, which usually works for me anyway. But this engenders a lot of questions, right? Like, what time frame are you talking about? What are you actually going to do with this information when you have it? Is this really the best way to present it? What time do you need this by? This is obviously like very urgent, but I don't know like if I'm gonna have to log in early to my morning to get this done for you, or what, right? And why a pie chart? So sometimes your end users will think that they know exactly what they need, or they know how to present something, when that's kind of your area as a data analyst. So what does this lead to? It's so many iterations, right? So you get this kind of vague request, and so you make a first draft of kind of what you think that they want, and then they look at it and they give you feedback, and then you make, iteration number 2. And maybe because they don't have their goals outlined or they haven't really thought about what they actually want before, then you have to make another iteration, and it just kind of goes along. So many iterations, and some, like at the bottom, catch on fire maybe, and you have to redo them.
That doesn't seem so smart.
Yeah. So what we want to do to avoid that is force them to think first, right? So when you have your intake process, kind of put the load on thinking about what they want onto your customer or your client or your end user. So we want the request to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, right? And if you kind of look, there's an acronym, SMART, all the first letters of those words, if that's easier to remember. But you might have seen this before, right? So what we want to create is have an intentional intake experience. So if you want them to give you like specific and measurable requests, you have to put that actually on the request form, right? So let me get into a demo here of what that actually looks like. So here, I just used Microsoft Forms, and I started putting together maybe some examples of some questions that kind of get them thinking about what they actually want, right? And then what we want to have happen is have those requests go into, whatever project management tool that you might use. So there's some people that use Trello is the example on the left, and Smartsheets there is on the right. But whatever system that you use really could go into this. So some things that you want to add on there, you'll have all of your questions that you're asking your end users to really think about the report. But maybe some other things to keep track of that will make this work is it's a good idea to have some sort of report or dashboard ID, some sort of unique identifier to that report, so that you can keep track of it. And I'll show you why in just a minute. But this could be like some sort of number that you maintain, like report number 1 is this, but it could be just the URL of the report because those are unique. Another thing to keep track of is links to different versions of the report. And Matt might talk about this in a minute, but you can save Power BI files as PBIX files. That's what they default to. And that saves all of the data in the file. But there's also another option called PBIT, and the T stands for template. And that just saves kind of like a shell, and it's a lot smaller file, so you can save more of them. So what you can do is save, version 1, version 1.1, version 1.2, kind of version your reports in the naming. And then you can link all of your change logs, to a version of the report at the time of that change. That's kind of the end result that we're looking for.
I like that.
Yeah, and then just keep track of other stuff like status, who's working on it, the date the change was made, maybe like a due date or something like that, right?
So it makes me wonder how many of our audience has had the opportunity to co-author reports and kind of work with each other. So maybe we should take a quick poll.
Yeah. I launched the poll. So votes are coming in pretty fast. Half of the people already voted. And the answer will surprise you. Okay.
I'm on pins and needles.
I'm going to give it a couple of more seconds to get those last few answers in. All the people who were browsing Reddit. Okay. We've got about 80% of the people. And it's 50-50.
Okay.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is interesting.
it is.
Cool. Well, maybe we'll ask you at the end if we have some time about what you guys, those that already co-author, what other tips that you have. So cool.
Okay, up to you guys again.
Thank you. All right, so here was that form that we were looking at, this Microsoft Forms. And then kind of what I did with mine, this is just an example one, but this is Microsoft Flow. So if you've never worked with flows before, they're really cool. You can kind of trigger different actions in different systems based on, when forms are submitted or there's a bunch of connections with Twitter or, really anything that you would want. But yeah, so I have it set up here so that when a new form is submitted, it's going to go fetch the form that was submitted and get all the response details. And then what I have it set up here is I have this hooked up to one of my Trello boards. And I have, the card name, who it was submitted by, and then I kind of piped in all these fields from the form. So it'll have, kind of some titles and then the response that the person put in, right? And then I also have an integration. This is with Twilio. It's a text message service. So this will send me a text message. And I think you can actually put in like a priority. So if you didn't want to get a text message with every single submission, you could do like only high priority or something like that. So this is pretty cool. So let me show you a Trello board here. So ideally what you could have come in is, you'd have all these requests. You could have like a list for new requests, and then, you can move these cards around into your backlog, doing or waiting on someone else or in peer review. This is just how Trello works, but you can add members, assign things, do a checklist or whatever, right? So you're probably familiar with this or have something similar. So what you can do from there, once you have that up and running, is actually create a Power BI report from your open tickets, right? And kind of two use cases that I found for this are something that you can use as a Scrum. So like every morning your team comes together and you look at all your open tickets, right? So this is just a kind of a simple report that we put together. You can have notes or description depending on what fields you actually collect on your form at the beginning. But here, this is where that report ID comes into play. So like, which report is this change request applicable to, right? So you can come in here and update all these. You can even put links to the tickets so you can go update them in real time. And then over here is the other use case, is a change log. And this one, I kind of imagine this to be on, each report that you create. You can go ahead and connect to your list of tickets that you made changes on and just say like, okay, for this, when you get your data, just say, okay, report ID equals, in this case, 4, or, whatever URL you're using for your report. So you can say like, you can go in and see, okay, they're asking me to do this change, but what is the history of all the changes on this report? So you can see like, okay, if they keep asking me to maybe change the date field from a slicer to like past 30 days, like a relative date slicer or something, and then keep going back and forth, you can say like, hey, you've asked for this a couple of times within the past year. Can we come to a consensus on this, right? Or just see what other analysts have done. So like if Matt were to make a change or something, I can see all the changes that he's done. I could go in and see all the notes that he's made. the description, or whatever you want to keep track of in here.
That's awesome. So you could synchronize that as a data source into your Power BI report, so your change logs updated not only in Trello, but it's also in the report and it's synchronized?
Right, yep.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah. So, and this Scrum is really helpful to keep people accountable on what requests are coming in and what the status of them are. So, good deal. Let me go back here. All right, so kind of getting down into that was kind of publishing reports and the intake process for your users, but the actual development work on a report, we kind of found that there's two major parts, right? You have to get the data and modeling, and the other part is kind of designing the user interface or interactions or visualizations, right? So talking about getting data and modeling data, I find it easier to do this with the desktop version rather than in Power BI Service. And it works best if you have one person do it on their own time or their own computer, and you can screen share. Because that part is, it doesn't really work well to do together, right? Because you have all those tables, setting up all those relationships, and then doing measures. You don't want one person to do one measure one way and another person to do a similar measure another way, right? So that's kind of what we found. And Matt and I are in the same time zone, so usually we'll get on like a screen sharing application and get our data in and model it.
Yeah.
For the other part, the building visuals, what's been kind of coming more online is updates to the Power BI service. So now you can actually it allows for people to edit a report at the same time. So like I could go into the Power BI service, add a visual on a page, and Matt could be there at the same time adding like text or even another visual, and it would save both of those, right? So it's very, very cool. I love it. And again, you can save that template file, that PBIT file, at any point to kind of save your work as like a versioning tool, right? So this allows you to work synchronously at the same time or asynchronously.
I like that.
Cool. So another kind of tip that we found is we noticed that, one analyst would make a report one way, and I would make a report a different way, and Matt would make a report a different way. So you could really tell who made the report almost just by looking at the visuals. So what we decided to do to kind of standardize that across our team was to make a template. And this is an example of something helpful that you could put on a template. So this is kind of like a help page. So I have kind of like 3 major things that I see people asking me for, like how do I drill down, how do I use the filters, and then like this data doesn't look right, and it's usually because they need to reset to default or the data hasn't refreshed, so it kind of keeps those questions at bay. But it's really good to standardize things so that you have more trust from your end users. And, you can go in and put your logo on the top right, or whatever you guys decide. And it's all going to look uniform and nice, and people will always know that your team made this data, and so you can trust it.
Would this be like building a brand?
Yeah, exactly right. So just the same as like, if you're on social media, you create a brand for yourself, and people kind of know what to expect when they see that brand. It's the same thing for all these reports.
Awesome. I like how consistent and uniform it kind of makes things.
Yeah. So some things to help you do this, as far as, kind of color swatches or color themes, there's this button in Power BI, the desktop version, that you can switch themes. They have some pre-made themes. There's even a gallery where you can go and look through. And they have a couple preloaded there, right? There's some for like high contrast or colorblind safe that are good to use. But you can also create your own. I don't know if any of you are aware of this tool. It's the theme generator, and I have the link in the slides. But basically, you can go in and, if you have a branding website or a style guide or something for your company, you can go in there and you can just, copy and paste the colors right into the boxes, and it'll create a JSON file for you that you can upload into your Power BI file as a theme. So just like we saw here, you can go and import a theme and just, choose it off of your machine, choose the file off of your machine. So that is really cool.
That is
And
awesome.
now we'll talk about data flows, and I'll give it over to Matt.
Well, thank you, Liz. That was definitely awesome. I love those pro tips, and I can vouch for the experience of how seamless it's made things, and it really has helped us to raise our reporting to the next level. So a little bit I want to talk about data flows and how that's helped for better uniformity across our whole group. One thing that data flows, the preview feature that Power BI has out, and I believe it's going to be an official feature here probably in the next month or so, based on their track record of how long things are in previews. But I found that the data flows, it creates a consistency in the data. And so in having that consistency in the data, it definitely helps to build trust that you have in that data. So if I build a report and Liz builds a report and some of our other analysts build a report, we're able to have uniformity. We have that same source of data. Also, like one practical experience for us as a university, we have a list of who's our students, and that list doesn't update every single day like it shouldn't in most cases. And so what we've found is, we have our list update once a month, and I've created a data flow. Instead of having my report, which refreshes 2 or 3 times a day for, how many of the different matrices and KPIs that we're tracking, we're able to take that and just download a static list of our students, and that static list gets updated once a month, and it creates a lot less of a server overhead. So instead of having to continuously ping Salesforce or Oracle for that information, you're just pulling a static list that can change but doesn't need to change. So if you have, like in my case, 9 reports, Liz has several reports that can access that same data flow. We're now no longer pulling so much data from our servers, and be able to pull a much faster refresh time as well. And also with that, it does build that trust so that our users, our executives will be able to see that and have consistency. They don't have to pivot and look at my report and Liz's report and say, why are you showing one number and my number's 2 numbers off because I refreshed it 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later? It's consistent, and it just builds that trust that you can trust the data that we're presenting. And the next topic I want to talk about is people skills. And so it's kind of that idea of the old song, how to love the one you're with, how to love those that you are with. Our coworkers are like our siblings. You can't choose who your coworkers are, just like you can't choose who your siblings are, but you have to learn to like them and love them and live with them. And so a couple of practical people skills is, how to, make people feel that they are present and included. So a question I want to ask a poll is about working remotely. And so we're going to ask a question to the group here about how many of you primarily work remotely or work in an in-office environment.
Okay.
So the quick poll should be coming up here. Yep, perfect.
Again, half of the people were very fast to vote. It's always amazing to see some of them just like mash the button. Then we slowly grind up to 80%.
Awesome. Well, I think that's the people that are in Europe are like active and ready at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's the people in like Australia and New Zealand that it's 3 in the morning. They
Yeah,
might be the ones that are a little slower.
yeah, that's possible. We've got some USA people joining us as well. So that's
Awesome. Welcome to all the USA people. I'm biased.
okay. So we've got about 3/4 of the people who voted. I'm closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. And as you should be able to see, it's a close one, with 57% of the people working remotely and 43 of them working together in an office.
All right. That makes sense. You know, about 57% of people are primarily working remotely, and that's kind of our day and age with technology, is that we're able to work remotely and be anywhere. So, a couple of pro tips, and I don't know if we've got our PowerPoint back on, or did I just lose mine?
No, I pressed the wrong button here. Hide.
All right.
So there your presentations again.
Thank you so much. So, a couple of things with working remotely that I think is a very important one is turn on your webcam. If I get the next slide, Liz. You know, definitely with turning on the webcam is something that is going to help people when you're doing those meetings one-on-one and one-on-many, being able to be present, be in the moment, having some accountability to stay focused. You know, no more multitasking when you have a webcam, because people can see you. You can't be in a meeting in the office, pull out your smartphone and start, you know, saying hi to people on Facebook. That just doesn't work. Why does it work remotely? Well, when you turn that webcam on, you can't do that. So one thing you got to consider to backtrack of that is, in that meeting that somebody's being required to go to, is the topic of the meeting even significant enough that they must, you know, put away what they're doing and focus on it? You know, is the purpose of the meeting worth stopping people from doing anything else that's important? Otherwise, what's the point of the meeting? And so, you know, having agendas and really think about that and being forethought in what you're doing, so you can create that collaboration. And you know, when people have their webcam on, it definitely feels like there's a connection. People are able to communicate. You know, 55% of the meeting and communication is based on what we see with our PowerPoints, with our visuals, being able to see body language and gestures. 38% of it's on how things sound. Really, only 7% of it's what's said. And so, if you're, you know, sitting there doing something else, sending emails, IMs, you know, and you're not fully engaged, I think you're missing out on everything but that 7%. And really, what benefit is there for you to even be in the meeting in the first place? Another thing that Liz kind of talked about is those live work sessions. That being able to kind of work one-on-one, screen sharing. We use Teams at the university, and so having one person drive and another person just sit there and collaborate on the fly has been some of the most effective ways that I've learned to grow as an analyst, is to collaborate, have these ideas. It's just like sitting right next to somebody, and you have this synergy. The 1 + 1 is definitely equaling 3 by having those one-on-ones. And also in the right context, do a one-on-many, a peer review process that is great. I've done this with one of my reports where it was time urgent. We had the next morning, we had a big meeting with a couple of VPs, and we had to have this report done. And so having 5 people, you know, sit there and in a live webcam session, you're presenting, you're going through, and you have Power BI open, and having everybody be able to collaborate and say, well, let's move this, let's change this, and have that conversation going. It might be stressful in the moment, but the ability to really take the best of everybody's ideas in a 30-minute or 1-hour session and be able to just be in that moment, I think it raises things to the next level. Another thing with people skills is being able to get to know one another. I build friendships, understand people. We live and work in these remote environments. We don't always get to go have a coffee or a beer with a coworker after work. So how do we get to know each other and build things to that next level and work with each other to, a deeper level? And I like the digital water cooler, as we call it. We do teams, we joke, we play, we'll throw out, instant messages to kind of just keep things real. We're not machines, and so we don't just work, just like when you're in the office. People stand around the water cooler and chit chat for a few minutes. Digitally doing that creates an environment of, people feeling that they're a part. And the next slide. Consistency is definitely the key. Being consistent in how the processes that you're doing when you're working remotely. For example, meetings, tools, and software. We've had a problem where we made some changes with our meetings, and the communications things fall, and you have 20 people showing up to a meeting in 4 different meeting rooms. And nobody, knows what's going on. It took half the meeting to kind of, people are like, it's like herding cats in a lot of ways. You got to get them around to get them back, to the right place. And, a lot of time is lost. So being consistent, being able to know, how to rely on things, it's the, communications is really what that's about. And we'll get more on communication here in a minute. People skills, talking about criticism and being able to give constructive feedback and compliments and criticism. And so one thing is to practice. They practice giving people feedback, help create a culture that you can, give people honest feedback. If something that I've done Liz doesn't like, we've created that culture where she's like, what about this? And she can give that positive feedback and that criticism, or, I really don't like that, or that data's wrong. And that was, I actually had a report I was working on where the source of the data, she was the subject matter expert and I wasn't. And because we had the ability to communicate openly, at the last minute, she was able to say, no, actually, that source of data is not right. There's some issues with that source of truth. And it might have been stressful in the moment to have to rebuild your report off of a different source of truth or use different data, pulling it from Oracle versus Salesforce or vice versa. But at the end of the day, we had because we have that honest feedback and that honest ability to speak, it's easier to go through. A little bit of criticism does go a long way, though. There's the idea of this ratio of how many compliments you give to criticism. And an example on this would be couples that are currently getting divorced. They give 0.75 compliments for every criticism they give. Well, it's probably a bad ratio if you're giving much more criticism than you are giving compliments. Teams that are more productive are, medium performance teams are giving close to 2 to 1. They're giving twice as much compliments as they are giving criticism. But I think we all strive for that high performance. And according to the Harvard Business Review, they did a thing, and teams that are the most effective are giving 5.6 compliments for every criticism that they offer. And so, being able to give each other the attaboys in that water cooler, and, that I really like this. Maybe next time work on this better, and being able to build people up.
Yeah, and I think one thing, if I'll just call out, that I enjoy working with Matt, because when people do give him criticism, I notice that he's always very gracious in receiving it. So I think there's something to be said there too. Like right when, of course, all of my feedback on his reports is totally 100% relevant, but I noticed that he'll always message me back and say like, oh, okay, I see your point there. Thank you so much for your opinion. And he could implement it or he could not, or, you always have the last say in your own reports. But I think that even when, you disagree, to be gracious and kind of, get over your own ego is something good to keep in mind for the sake of the team and making your reports better.
Absolutely. I 100% agree that, being able to be humility, and that's, if we want to move to the next slide, is that humility is definitely a key to accepting criticism. We are all in this together. We're not, unless you work for a company where you are the CEO of you and you're the only one that is in that company, we have to learn to work as a team. And, being able to realize that I don't have every great idea. I don't have, some of my ideas are bad. And sometimes I don't have the best experience into something. And so, my team is got my back. They're not, just going through. And I think that a lot of that's creating that safe environment where people can ask questions, creating that safe environment where people aren't, I want to give you a bad idea so that you don't get promoted, so I do get them promoted. I think that people kind of backstabbing and stuff like that definitely destroys that that type of environment. And so, being able to create a team environment where we all succeed together and we all fell together. We win and fell together. So when one of us gets promoted, that is awesome. It's like they're the MVP of our team for that time, because at some point, maybe I get promoted today, but next time Liz gets promoted, and then our other coworkers get promoted, because together we're gonna achieve something greater. And the kind of one thing I want to get back into is communication, as we kind of hinted to a little bit. It's just like when buying a house. They talk about buying a house. The three things that matter are location, location, location. Well, I would say in the business world, especially remotely, there is three things that matter: communication, communication, communication. Something that we talk about in the office a lot is 10 times 10 ways. It's never a problem to over communicate, saying, send an email, send an IM, pick up the phone and call somebody. I know that's hard to actually dial those numbers, but it's possible. And talk and, jump on Teams with your webcam on, of course. But, having 10 different ways to communicate, keep communicating until people tell you, hey, you're over communicating. Because, like the meeting issue that we had where one IM went out, that the meeting room changed, and then that room wasn't even available, so we had to send a second IM. You missed those two IMs, and we had 20 people in 4 different places, and there was, that lack of communication that caused everybody to scatter. And so, over communicating would have prevented that from happening, and so I find that communication is definitely key. And yeah, one thing with communication is, when you're communicating and complimenting, don't be superficial. It may be hard. You got to practice it up front and try, but not being superficial and being, because I think if you're just superficial to people, that's going to be a poor compliment's probably just as bad as a bad criticism. And so be real with people. Be honest. Come up with something that you do like. There's always positive in everything that people are doing, and so find ways to be able to speak to that positive.
Yep, I love it. And I think one of the benefits that we've seen, I was just thinking as we were talking, is that I think by doing this over time, we've kind of gotten into a rhythm of like everybody kind of has their own things that they're best at, right? Like I would say I'm good at M and DAX, but I'm not good at like designing the visual part of it, right? Like making it make sense or look nice or like the way it looks on the page, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate like some of our other team members are really good at that. So when I peer review my reports, I'm so grateful for their expertise in trying to comment on how I'm doing, because it makes the report look better, and it also makes me a better analyst because I can learn from them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree. Sometimes you throw out that peer review and it's a little scary. You throw it out and it's like I've done my best and I'm throwing this out to others, but I think the advantage I believe that we have is because of that honest trust that was built with our team, is people can come back and give you how to make it better. And I agree, it drives you to that next level so that you can improve, because the next time around you're going to see through their eyes, and the more eyes you can see through, the better your reports become, and you can lead others to see the way you're seeing.
Yep.
So I think if we have any questions, we can definitely throw that out if anybody has any questions, or you can also reach out to us through either email, or is that your Twitter? I'm not a tweeter person, so.
Yeah. And I am also the group leader, if I can do a 30-second plug, for the Women in Power BI group. So if you'd like to join, there's, just go on the Power BI user group website and search for Women in Power BI. I'd love to have you and continue the conversation there.
Yeah, I'll push people over there. Don't worry.
Cool.
We got 2 questions, more near the beginning of the session, but it's okay. So Rishi was actually wondering if you're using the service from multiple developers who are creating visuals. Have you seen that work well? Because in his mind, he thinks the ability to now copy paste between Power BI files makes the solution a little bit redundant.
That's a good point. I have noticed that you do need to refresh to see the other person's edits. So it's sort of annoying to kind of keep hitting that refresh button. But
Okay.
I think, like, even if you were copying and pasting using the desktop, I don't think that you could do that in real time. Or I guess I'm having trouble imagining, like, if you were working at the same time with another person, how that would work in the desktop version,
Yeah.
unless you were like publishing a ton.
It would become very hard because he also says that he's working in an office with people, obviously, but like a couple of them are Power BI developers and they are based offshore. And doing it that way makes it very difficult to collaborate on files on the same file. So you have the check-in, check-out files that is too rigid, and now at the moment, they just have people update a spreadsheet where they are noting the reports they are working on. How do you see that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, let me see if I can actually get into this.
Yeah.
Okay, so like here's the PBI file that I had before. If you just click on Edit Report, you can see here that I have access to all the same fields. I can add visualizations, like if I wanted to put new stuff on here. Now if Matt was looking at the same report and he refreshed, he would see this visual here.
Yeah. We've done this a couple of times with reports. I think from our basis of a lot of the times when we've done this in real time, is it's an enhancement to the preset expectation of working where it's Power BI desktop and one person has desktop open and the other person's screen sharing and just kind of helping one person drive and collaborating on the fly as you're talking. I think when you can build your report, upload it into the cloud service, and then as we're communicating, and we're still in a screen share, we're still chatting with each other. You know, I have multiple monitors, and so a lot of the times I'll have that screen share in my right monitor and my center monitor. I will have the report open myself. And so as we're still collaborating, it just brings us to the next level. It's like, well, what about this? And instead of trying to communicate, it's like, here, let me just throw it in there. And so I'll put in a visual, I'll change a few things, save it, go ahead and refresh real quick. And it kind of allows both people to drive a little more seamless. It's not as seamless as something like Excel or Word or PowerPoint online. I hope that Microsoft can enhance their platform to a point where it is real time and seamless that way, but it's better than two people having desktop open and only one person actually, you know, doing everything and driving completely.
Okay. And do you actually see a lot of people working together on reports?
I think the enhancements, like the Power BI service, is always the last thing to get enhancements. So I don't remember actually when they made this available, but I do know that this has not always been available to work like this. So, I mean, I don't, in our organization, I think people are still doing the check in and check out files type of thing, which is very hard. But yeah, I think this is fairly new, so I'd say not as much.
I think we've only done what, 2 or 3 times, 1 or 2 times.
Hmm.
I know we've done it a few, but not a, you know, it's definitely been the exception, but it's kind of a new thing that I find is better than like when we did that voucher report. It was really cumbersome to go back and forth, check in and check out. And so I think this definitely is a better pro tip, maybe as things enhance, just, you know, circle back to it every quarter, maybe circle back and spend an hour with somebody and try it, see if it becomes less cumbersome and if it's a better tip, you know, better way for you to do things in, you know, than what happened. I think that's with anything Power BI is probably good ideas. Everything's changing, so maybe every, you know, quarter, go back and try something again. Those ideas you had a year ago didn't work a year ago, but today they might work because, you know, they've enhanced it to make it work better.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. Okay, so Alex has one last question. When you're talking about communication, do you encourage that people build their own report, or is that a process that your team owns fully, and the engagement with end users to define the request?
Oh, for us, Power BI is fairly new to our organization and it's not implemented organization wide. It's only on our department. So our end users don't create they have no, they don't use Power BI other than just consuming the reports and looking at the visuals. I don't know if that's what you mean, but so our end users don't create any part of any report really.
Yeah. So you guys at the moment still own the entire process and everything around it, and you just serve the users.
Yeah, our
Right, yeah.
users would be like our management structure is making decisions based on the reports that we create. So our customers in essence are our leaders. And so we work as a team where each one of us, you know, we have a kind of we're a subject matter expert of specific aspects of the university, but the actual customer would be like the director of this, that, or the other thing. And so we kind of serve their needs and create our reports to serve what their needs are. So it's kind of probably different than other organizations or other companies where they have, you know, end users or customers using it. We don't have like any students or anything that would access our reports. It's just more of an analysis tool so they could decide, based on this, maybe we need to hire more, maybe we need to try this. We're doing this initiative and we want to see the ROI of this initiative, so let's create a report of before, during, and after so that we can see how effective this is and those type of uses.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. If not, Alex, please shout it out now. I'm not seeing any reaction. Oh, yeah. I think it's okay. Well, with that, I also just want to thank you guys for doing this. It's an interesting topic to be speaking about. Usually, you'll only see technical topics, people talking about a function or a feature or whatever. And we're doing way too. Not doing enough with stuff like this, with the soft skills, basically working together. So
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
yeah, you're welcome. If you want to share some more, just get in touch, and I'll gladly give you a podium either at the next Power BI days. We run about every 3 months, or either at one of the user groups events. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, I'm closing this webinar down, and I'm going to start up Denisha's Malone webinar, which is the last one for today, but it's a good one. Customizing the premium metrics application to optimize the service. So if you're using premium capacity, you will love this one. See you.